Welcome once again, my fellow manipulators of digital fate. I'm Richie, this is Capricorn, and we are back at it with another spoiler video for Magic the Gathering's Avatar: The Last Airbender expansion. We have a ton of spoilers to go over today, a lot of crazy stuff, some very interesting cards. I can't wait to dive right in, so we're going to do that. Before we do, please like the video, yada yada yada, it helps me so much. But I'm going to reiterate, it helps me so much. Please, it takes you 2 seconds. Just hit like. Thank you. Subscribe if you're new because more spoiler content and deck techs are on the way, as well as a couple of surprises. So let's dive right in and check out these cards. First of all, we've got Airship Engine Room and honestly an entire cycle of common dual lands, which we normally get in every draftable set. These are lands that enter tapped, tap for a mana of one of two colors, and then you can pay 4 mana, tap, and sacrifice the land to draw a card. We've got Airship Engine Room here, which is in the colors of Izzet, Boiling Rock Prison, which is in the colors of Rakdos, Foggy Bottom Swamp for Golgari, Kyoshi Village for Selesnya, Meditation Pools for Simic, Misty Palms Oasis for Orzhov, North Pole Gates for Azorius, Omashu City for Gruul, Serpent's Pass for Dimir, and Sun Blessed Peak for Boros. These lands aren't anything super special, but it's nice to have at least some kind of interesting quirk on your common cycle of dual lands. It's going to make it easier to get these and use them to draft decks that are multicolor and limited, so you definitely need the full cycle of every color pair. And this will do that, but there's that little extra value that you can sack the lands to draw a card, which is nice. It's not anything super crazy, you're not going to run these in standard or anything, but nice little bit of extra value for when you don't need the color fixing later on in the game, and you can get a little bit of card advantage out of the card. Next up, we've got Callous Inspector, a 1/1 human soldier with Menace for 1 black mana. When this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to you, and you create a clue token. Honestly, pretty good for a 1-drop, especially for a common. 1/1 Menace is at least going to get through once or twice for a little bit of damage, and if they do eventually kill it, they're going to have to double block it in order to do so, which means maybe one of your other creatures is getting through unblocked because of it. And when it dies, you get to capitalize and get card advantage, get a clue token to eventually draw a card when you sack it. So I think the ways in which this actually lines up on the board, especially in limited play, make it more valuable than it appears on the surface. The only real downside here is it's not an ally. An ally is a huge deal in this set, but I still think this card's actually going to surprise some people in limited with just how versatile it is, because sure, they can kill it easily, but if they don't double block it and keep letting it through, you're pinging them to death little by little, death by 1,000 cuts. If they do decide to block it, they have to double up on just a 1/1 dude that gives you card advantage when it dies. So I just think this card's going to be a little bit underestimated, and I think it's actually going to be a really good common for limited. Next up, we've got Sold Out, an instant for 1 black and 3. Exile target creature. If it was dealt damage this turn, you create a clue token. Kind of interesting here. You could like block with a 1/4 or 1/5 to their like 3/3, and then after combat damage, sure, you didn't kill their guy, your guys just bounced off each other, but then you get to exile it with this and get a clue token because you hit it for a little bit of negligible damage in combat. You can set up certain things like that that are kind of interesting. You can also use First Strike, swing with like a 2/2 First Strike or something like that, and they block it. Even if they block it with like an 8/8, you hit them for damage during First Strike combat, and then you can play this at instant speed, exile their creature before you go to normal damage so that your First Striker doesn't die. You can do some really cool stuff like that and still get the clue token. So I think there's some interesting ways to pivot with this card and get value out of it. 4 mana is kind of a lot, but for instant speed removal that exiles and potentially replaces itself with another card, I think that's about the best you can hope for when it comes to common removal for limited. And I do think this is going to be one of the better pieces of common removal that people are going to want to scoop up when they are playing in sealed and in draft. Next up, we've got Platypus-Bear, a 2/3 creature Platypus-Bear with Defender for 2 mana in the colors of Simic. It is a hybrid mana, so you only need to be in green or blue, not both. and it's got Defender, so 2/3 Defender for 2. When it enters, you mill 2 cards, and as long as there is a lesson card in your graveyard, this creature can attack as though it didn't have Defender. I actually think this is pretty good if you're in a deck that wants to fill up your graveyard, because that milling 2 cards, it's kind of okay in order to sort of turn itself on and hopefully hit a lesson, put a lesson in the graveyard to turn itself on. At that point, it's just a 2/3 for 2, which isn't bad at the common slot when you're talking about limited. But it gets even better if you get more value out of the mill. If turning this on as an attacker is an incidental benefit, but really there are other bigger reasons for why you want to self-mill and fill up your graveyard, then this gets a whole lot better. And if there's an archetype in Limited where you specifically want to do that, and it seems like there will be, that's the kind of archetype you want to play this card in for sure. But even outside of that archetype, you know, if you're short on cards, especially filling out your curve, you could do a lot worse than to add this as your 22nd, 23rd card to help round out your curve in the 2-drop slot. Next up, we've got our first uncommon today. This is Gather the White Lotus, a sorcery for 1 white and 4. You create a 1/1 white ally creature token for each planes you control, and then scry 2. What a cool card. This basically insinuates that they want you to try to draft into monocolor in Limited, which is kind of exciting. We haven't seen monocolor be truly viable in a Limited format in quite a long time. In fact, most of the sets that we've gotten over the last few years have been heavily tilted towards multicolor, to the point where they make it a little easier to even go 3-color. So seeing something like this is super refreshing, and I hope that it's actually viable. I hope you could go like full on mono white and get the absolute most value out of this card, and hopefully there's even more cards that double down on that kind of value coming from monocolor decks, because I think it would be really, really cool to just be able to go old school, draft monocolor, and actually make it work and get a ton of value out of this, you know. Even if you just play this on curve on 5, if everything's a plains, you get 5 1/1s and scry 2 for your 5 mana, which in Constructed, that's not anything super crazy, but in Limited, that would be absolutely bonkers, especially if you're in a deck that cares about going wide and gets even more value off of going wide with that many creatures. It also is worth pointing out that they all count as allies, so all of those ally tribal benefits and buffs they can easily pick up, maybe become 2/2s or 2/1s with some of the other cards we've seen. A lot of potential value here if monocolor is legit. If not, if you're forced to play this in a 2 or 3 color deck, it gets significantly worse. I'm not sure how I feel about it. I think at most you're going to want to play like almost completely white and maybe just splash a tiny bit of another color for a couple pieces of removal or a bomb or something like that, to really make this card work. Otherwise, I don't know if it makes the cut, but I am holding out hope that that kind of deck archetype is viable in Limited for this set, because I think it would be super fun. Next up, we've got Tiger-Dillo. That's what, a tiger that's an armadillo? Sure. A 4/3 creature cat armadillo for just 2 mana, 1 red and 1, but it can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. What an interesting card. If you have, do you just go Tiger-Dillo Tribal? You play one of these on 2, and then if you play a second one on 3, they see each other, and they both get turned on? Like, that's exciting. That's, I don't know, maybe you can. I mean, it's an uncommon. If it was a common, I think you could probably try to go for like a 3 to 5 copy Tiger-Dillo deck, which would be hilarious. As an uncommon, I don't know if you can quite lean that heavily on it, but even if you just pick up like a couple of these and you have the chance of having them turn on each other, but then you're also in a deck that can, you know, consistently get to that power 4 with other creatures, I think this could end up being really good. The thing you have to watch out for is it can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. So it's literally sitting there doing nothing on the board until you have a way to turn it on. It's not like some other creatures we've seen similar to this in the past that can block and just can't attack until you meet the requirement. This guy can't attack or block until you meet the requirement. So you do want to be very, very careful with how you build around this in Limited, and you probably want to know that you're going into a power 4 deck right off the bat and pick up as many cards like this as you can and double down on the synergies, because this is not a card that you can just go lukewarm on and sort of dip your toe in. You really have to go all in on the synergies to make it worth running. But if you can pull it off and make it super consistent, this card would be insanely powerful on curve and can get... it can do a lot of work, for sure. Next up, we've got Ember Island Production, a sorcery for 2 blue and 3, and you choose one. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's not legendary, and it's a 4/4 hero in addition to its other types. Interesting. Or create a token that's a copy of target creature an opponent controls, except it's not legendary, and it's a 2/2 coward in addition to its other types. What an interesting card. I think the most exciting part about this is that you're not just copying something, but you're getting a token that's a copy. So you can utilize token synergies, things like Caretaker's Talent, or I forget the name of the card, but I think there was a card we got into Standard a while back that could copy only tokens. So you could like make a token copy of something really good with this, and then make more copies of that token since it's a token with that other card. If you remember the name of that card, let me know in the comments. Either way, I like the versatility here. It stinks that when you copy one of their things, it's only a 2/2. It gets a little bit better if you copy one of your things. It's a 4/4. That makes sense. That being said, I think the versatility of this card is pretty good for limited. The fact that you could have like a 1/1 or a 2/2 creature that has really good text box, really good special abilities, and make a copy of it that now has all of those benefits but is even bigger, a 4/4, is a really cool way to use this that I think might be overlooked by a lot of people. I think most people see that power and toughness being set to 4/4 or 2/2, and they think strict downgrade, especially with the 2/2. Most of the time that will be the case. But it's possible to get all the value out of a bomby, small creature and have it be an even bigger body, which is kind of exciting to me. This is definitely one of those cards that it depends how many cards work with it well and synergize with it well. The one thing I do want to point out is we just got done seeing the power 4 or greater mechanic and how relevant that is, and the fact that the copy of whatever you make is a 4/4 and turns on all those power 4 requirements is a nice little bit of extra value, a nice caveat there that I think a lot of people might overlook at first. This is a way to guarantee you can turn on those types of synergies, which is kind of nice. So this card depends on what the rest of the set looks like and how many cards it interacts with favorably, how many cards care about the text box more than the power toughness and give you the absolute most value when you're copying stuff. So it's a little bit tricky to evaluate right now, but I think the potential is for sure there. Next up, we have Shared Roots. This is 1 green and 1 for a sorcery lesson. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is awesome. This is basically a functional reprint of... what was the name of that card? Oh, it's such a commonly played card. I can't believe I can't remember. You know the card I'm talking about. 2 mana, search for a basic land, put it into the battlefield tapped. What's cool about this version of the card is it's a lesson. It's just sort of strictly better in most ways. In older formats, you can use a learn spell to find this out of your sideboard, which is awesome. And if we potentially get learn spells down the road in like the new Strixhaven set that's coming next year, this card gets a lot better. And then there are certain lesson synergies within this set as well. Even though there aren't any learn spells in this set, there are things that care about lessons and get better with lessons. So I think this subtype lesson is just a strict upgrade on a card like this that could even get better over time. Pretty exciting stuff, honestly. I think this card's really good. I think it's going to see play in Standard, and I think it's going to be a staple as we move forward into 2026. But next up, we've got Twin Blades. Artifact equipment with flash for 1 red and 2. It equips for 2 mana, but when it enters, you attach it to target creature you control, and that creature gains double strike until end of turn. Equipped creature gets +1/+1. I love equipment like this where you get tricky combat trick value immediately, but then you get leftover permanent value that sticks around forever. So instant speed combat trick, +1/+1 and double strike, blow out your opponent, maybe just win the game by hitting them for massive damage, or maybe just like kill their guy in combat and make your guy survive. There's a lot of tricky ways you can use that, and then it leaves behind the +1/+1 buff permanently. But then on top of that, if they eventually kill that creature, you just re-equip it for 2, so it's even more value than just a normal +1/+1 buff. All of this together, I think, actually makes this card kind of good. Is it the next, what was that red? Embercleave. Is it the next Embercleave? Not quite. You know, it doesn't give out trample. It's not like super insane, but instant speed, double strike, and buff that sticks around is nothing to scoff at. I guess the double strike doesn't stick around, and that's why it's not quite as good as Embercleave. But one thing I want to point out about this is it's a non-creature spell. It can trigger all of your prowess. Triggering all your prowess and buffing your creature and giving it double strike seems really, really scary in mono red aggro. The prowess decks in particular. Maybe even is it prowess after Vivi gets the boot. Could this card see play in standard? Possibly. I mean 3's a lot for decks like that, but this could potentially do a lot and just alpha strike for the win in the right situations. So I think there's a chance. I really do think there's a chance. Next up, we've got Earth Kingdom General, a 2/2 human soldier ally for 1 green and 3. When it enters, you get to Earthbend 2, turning one of your lands into a 0/0 creature with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. And remember, the best part about Earthbending is if that creature then dies, it comes back as the normal land. So you don't risk losing one of your lands, which is awesome. So you get 4/4 worth of power and toughness spread across 2 bodies for 4 mana. But also, whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on a creature, you may gain that much life. Do this only once each turn. So he also gains you 2 life when he enters, and then potentially starts to gain you more life every single turn as the game goes on. Whether you're in the Earthbending deck or just a +1/+1 Matters deck, I think this card is super solid. Just getting 4/4 worth of stats and 2 life right off the bat seems kind of good all by itself. And the fact that you can gain more life later is just extra gravy, in my opinion. I really like this card, and it's an ally, so it matters that much more. Next up, we've got Enter the Avatar State, an instant lesson for 1 white mana. Until end of turn, target creature you control becomes an avatar in addition to its other types, and gains Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, and Hexproof. Pretty interesting. I think the avatar creature type is more just for flavor. But 1 mana instant speed lesson that gives Flying, First Strike, Lifelink, and Hexproof is pretty substantial. You can use it to protect your guy with the Hexproof. You can use it to fly in and deal the killing blow because of the flying. First Strike makes it a really good combat trick. Lifelink helps you win the race against aggro. This card just kind of does everything. And then the fact that it's a lesson just adds even more value when you start lining it up with those synergies. So I think this card's really, really good. Really, really good. I expect to see it a lot in Limited. Next up, we've got Earth Kingdom Jailer, a 3/3 human soldier ally for 1 white and 2. When it enters, you exile up to 1 target artifact, creature, or enchantment an opponent controls with mana value 3 or greater until this creature leaves the battlefield. This is kind of an interesting card. It's got the stipulation that you have to hit something with mana value 3 or greater, but you can hit 3 different types of permanents, and you get a decent body on this to boot. Most times when we see creatures like this that act as pseudo removal on ETB, we don't quite see a very relevant body. Usually it's a 2/2 at most. The fact that we get a 3/3 for our 3 mana as well as exiling something is great. And the fact that we're exiling something that's 3 or more and not 3 or less means we're always hitting something that's equal or greater value to the mana that we're dumping into this guy to play it. So all of that stuff taken into account, I think he's really good. You're probably not going to jam him down super quick on curve. You're going to want to keep him in your hand until you can hit something relevant later on in the game. He can't hit a 2-drop, so if you're on the play, he's not coming down on 3. But all of that is stuff that you can sort of build around and keep in mind. This is absolutely a value play that you just make a little bit later on in the game, and then the body ends up being relevant, whereas normally with cards like this, the body just isn't relevant. So you could potentially block or continue to push pressure on your opponent after removing the thing, and all of that seems really good to me, especially because it's an ally, and it's going to pick up those tribal buffs. Next up, we've got Boomy, King of 3 Trials, a 4/4 legendary human noble ally for 1 green and 5. When he enters, you choose up to X, where X is the number of lesson cards in your graveyard. So you could have up to 3 lesson cards in your graveyard, and then pick up to 3 of these abilities to trigger. You're not going to be able to, pick one of these more than once. You're not going to be able to have like 7 lesson cards and pick like one of these once and then another one once and the other one 5 times. Like, you can only at most get each of these to trigger once, 3 things for 3 lessons. That being said, you can put 3 +1/+1 counters on Boomy, or target player scries 3, or you Earthbend 3. All of those abilities seem kind of powerful. That being said, 6 mana is a lot. 6 mana is an awful lot. I definitely don't think this makes the cut in Standard. In Limited, it's actually kind of cool, because in Limited, it's very splashable. And I think even if you're not in the lesson deck, you're going to have a negligible amount of lessons in your deck regardless. And by the time you get to 6 mana where you can actually play this thing, you're bound to have at least 1 or 2 lesson cards in your graveyard, I think, even if you're not deep into the lesson deck. Obviously, if you're deep into the lesson deck, this guy gets better. You can more consistently assure that as soon as you have your 6 mana, you'll immediately be able to get all of the value. But I think he might be worth considering as a splash, considering he takes only 1 green mana, even in decks outside of the lesson deck, because I do think every deck's going to have a certain amount of lessons just incidentally in the deck anyway. So you could potentially, if you trigger all 3 of these, have a 7/7, scry 3, and turn a land into a 3/3. That's 10/10 worth of power and toughness across 2 bodies, and a scry 3 for your 6 mana. Splashable. All of that seems pretty good in Limited, especially because he's a human and an ally, very relevant creature types, especially ally for this set in Limited. So I think this guy's a little bit better than he looks on the surface. 6 mana is still 6 mana, so I'm not entirely sure just how good he is, but the value is definitely there, even outside of lesson decks. So I think he's worth trying for sure, and I'm excited to see how good he ends up being, and how fast or slow this format ends up being in Limited, and how likely it is to get all of the value off of this guy. But next up, we've got Tolls of War, an enchantment for 2 mana in the colors of Orzhov. When this enchantment enters, you create a clue token, and whenever you sacrifice a permanent during your turn, you create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. I kind of love this card. Not only do you get card advantage right out of the gate as soon as you play it, because you get that clue token, but every time you sacrifice a permanent, or I should say once a turn when you sacrifice a permanent, you get a 1/1 token to replace the thing that you sacrificed. This seems really good in sacrifice decks and aristocrat style deck, as you constantly keep your creature count high by getting 1 thing back each turn when you're sacrificing, so that you always have the fuel to just channel into your sacrifice outlets and do the thing that you want to do. But what I love about this card the most is it works so well with token decks. You could play this with Caretaker's Talent. As soon as you play it, it creates that clue token, triggers the Caretaker's Talent, and draws you a card. And then every single time you sacrifice something, or the first time you sacrifice something on your turn, it's going to automatically make a token creature, trigger that Caretaker's Talent, and draw you a card again. So you don't even really need to worry about creating tokens with the cards in your hand. You can just focus on sacrificing stuff and get your tokens that way and trigger your Caretaker's Talent. So I think there's a lot of value to be had with this card. I think some kind of weird hybrid deck that utilizes like sacrifice synergies but also token synergies like Caretaker's Talent could push this card over the edge and make it really, really good. You're not necessarily going to want to play it on curve on 2, where it doesn't really affect the board state too much. But I think it could add a lot of value in the right deck if you can get those synergies to line up and overlap well enough. So excited to try this card out and brew with it. If you have an idea for a deck build that would utilize this card, definitely let me know in the comments, because this is one that I think would be super, super fun to brew around. But next up, we've got Bitterwork, an enchantment for 3 mana in the colors of Gruul. Whenever you attack a player with 1 or more creatures with power 4 or greater, you draw a card. And then you can exhaust 4 to Earthbend 4, activate only during your turn. What an interesting card. So it's not necessarily a do nothing. You can wait and jam it on a board state where you already have a creature with power 4 or greater that's ready to attack. Immediately attack and get to draw that card. And then even though you didn't really contribute to the board state when you first played this, it's got this ability later on where you can get extra value out of this, turn one of your lands into a 4/4, and contribute to the board state that way without using up another card in your hand. So I do think the value is here. The potential to draw a bunch of cards is here. A card like this, I think, can be really, really good in Limited. Turning on the ability to draw an extra card a turn in the right deck is huge, and not giving up on eventual board presence in order to do so because of that exhaust ability that eventually puts pressure on the board really makes a difference. I think this card is actually going to be super, super good in Limited. I'm excited to play with it. I think it's going to absolutely be the backbone of a Power 4 Matters deck. And I think you try to draft this super quick and build around it because it's not going to table. But next up, we've got Cruel Administrator. This is a 5/4 creature human soldier for 5 mana in the colors of Rakdos, which is a lot. But he has a raid ability. He enters with a +1/+1 counter on it if you attack this turn. So he'd be a 6/5 for 5. Not bad. That's just kind of gravy. That's definitely not the reason you'd want to play this card. But still, it's a nice little bit of extra value. And then whenever this creature attacks, you create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1. And that's where the real value of this card comes in. I expect this card to be a very important signpost card for a specific archetype, maybe the Firebending archetype in Limited. If you get this down and your opponent can't remove it, you just start to get overwhelming value. If you can make sure you get the counter on it, you're that much more likely to be able to swing in over and over and not have it die in combat. So I like that there's a way to buff it up and make it even less susceptible to trading in combat so that you can get more attacks in with it, create more 2/2s with Firebending, and then if it does end up dying a few turns down the road, like you've created all this value and probably traded with something big in the process. And that's probably enough to put you so far ahead that it's hard for your opponent to come back, and you probably end up winning the games. Even though this guy is kind of expensive at 5, I feel like in the right deck where you line things up correctly, he can do a lot for you and get you a ton of value, especially if you have even more ways to use that Firebending mana that you're making. The more 2/2s you make, the more potential you have to create even more mana every turn and funnel that into crazy activated abilities or instants, and it can just snowball out of control. So again, even though it's a little bit expensive, I feel like this is a signpost for a certain archetype, and I'm really excited to see how relevant this card ends up being because I think it's going to be super fun. Next up, we've got our first rare today. This is Firebender Ascension. 1 red and 1 for an enchantment. When it enters, you create a 2/2 red soldier creature token with Firebending 1, which is already awesome right off the bat. You get 2 permanents on the battlefield. One of them is a relatively on-rate 2/2 for 2 with an extra ability that's going to generate mana for you. Plus, you've got the enchantment. And then whenever a creature you control attacking causes a triggered ability of that creature to trigger, you put a quest counter on this enchantment, and if it has 4 or more quest counters on it, you may copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Sure, you have the extra hoops you need to jump through of getting the quest counters on this thing, but once you do, I feel like it's strictly better than most of the other creatures that we've seen over the last few years that have had this kind of like double trigger ability for attacking triggers, because it's in the form of an enchantment. They can't just get rid of this ability to copy attack triggers by using creature removal to get rid of a creature. They can get rid of the 2/2 with Firebending 1, but you're still left with the enchantment as value if they do. And if they do somehow have enchantment removal and get rid of this, you still have the 2/2 with Firebending left over as well. So no matter what, you kind of have this value that's going to be left behind even if they have removal for one or the other. And once you get up to those 4 quest counters, well, now you're copying all of your attack triggers, including the Firebending 1 from the token that you made if he's still around, and all of the Firebending for any of the Firebending cards that you have in your deck, not to mention all of the other attack triggers you could potentially have in your deck. Like, I feel like this card gets really crazy really quick. And the most important part to me is simply the fact that they can't get rid of the doubling ability with creature removal. We haven't had a card that allows for that in quite a while. We've gotten a number of these doubling abilities in sets over the last few years, and every single time it's been attached to a creature that our opponent could just kill with creature removal that they're bound to have in their hand, right? This thing is just going to stick unless they have enchantment removal, and I love that. And I love that it gives you the 2/2 with firebending as well, so you have that extra value of these 2 permanents. Everything about this card is nuts, and I'm excited to brew with it. I think it's going to be really crazy. But next up, we have the Earth King, a 2/2 legendary human noble ally for 1 green and 3. When he enters, you create a 4/4 green bear creature token, and then whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 4 or greater attack, you search your library for up to that many basic land cards, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So right off the bat, I want to say that I think I'm reading this right, but I would like your comments below if you think I'm wrong. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 4 or greater attack, search your library for up to that many basic land cards. So I think you're searching for a number of basic land cards equal to the number of creatures that you control that attacked that had power 4. So if you attack with 3 power 4 creatures, you'll get to search for 3 lands. Although you could see this, because of the way it's worded, as whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 4 or greater attack, like, you could look at what their power is. If their power is 7, search for 7, right? It's just, the way it's worded is a little bit confusing. Because I've been playing Magic for so long and I know how Magic works, to me it seems obvious that it's how many creatures you control that are attacking that have power 4 or greater is how many lands you search for. But the way it's worded, I feel like could be confusing for newer players, and they could be like, oh, well, so if I attack with something with power 4, do I search for 4 basic lands? No. I'm almost positive. In fact, I'm going to say I'm positive that it's how many creatures attacked that have power 4 or greater. But anyway, with that out of the way, a 2/2 and a 4/4 spread across, you get 6 power, 6 toughness spread across 2 bodies for just 4 mana. That's already really good with relevant creature types. And then the fact that you can just search for multiple basic lands every attack, not just once, but every single time you attack, also seems crazy. And you don't even have to attack with the Earth King in order to trigger this, right? Earth King can sit back, be safe, not put itself at risk to dying in combat, and you can still get these triggers. At the very least, you can trigger it once with the 4/4 that you're creating, and if you're in the power 4 or greater deck, you could trigger it a bunch of times, potentially get a bunch of lands, and you could do that every attack. So all of that seems like the most insane gravy ever on a card that's already going to be pretty good. Granted, it's a rare, so what standard deck actually wants it? Does it make the cut in standard? I think the stats are amazing for limited, but you're not going to see it very often in limited because it's a rare. I definitely feel like there has to be a deck in standard that wants this card. I don't know exactly what deck that is yet, but if you have ideas, definitely let me know in the comments because I think the potential is there for sure. Next up, we've got Fire Nation Palace. Personally, I think this card is kind of nutty. Let's see if you agree. This is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic land. You can tap it for a red mana, and then you can also pay 1 red and 1, tap it, target creature you control gains Firebending 4 until end of turn, which means whenever it attacks, you'll get 4 red mana in your mana pool, but it only lasts until end of combat. This is basically like a fixed Ancient Tomb in a way. It's not, but it kind of is. It's going to get you a net of 1 extra mana, right? Instead of tapping it for 1 mana, you tap it and 2 other lands, and if you go through the right hoops and you're lining things up correctly, that turns into 4 mana for you. So 3 lands gives you 4 mana. So it kind of feels like this thing gives you an extra mana, kind of like Ancient Tomb. The big downside is you're not going to get that mana early because you have to have extra mana to dump into this to turn on that ability, and you have to jump through the hoops of having an attacking creature to trigger the Firebending 4. But in the right deck, that's going to be everything that you want. If you're in like the mono red prowess deck or an Is It Prowess deck or something, especially after Vivi gets the boot, extra mana in the middle of combat to just fire off all of your buff spells and just win the game. 1 extra mana can be a lot in a deck like that on a key turn where it could make the difference between winning that turn or having to wait until next turn. So being able to get that extra mana out of this seems nuts, and the fact that all you need to have is a basic land to have this enter untapped is crazy as well. Mono red, this is almost always entering untapped, and then getting you that extra mana on a key turn when you need it, with almost no downside, right? These lands have basically no downside if you're in a monocolor deck, and the downside is even kind of negligible in a 2-color deck, to be completely honest. It is worth pointing out you have to control a basic land, not a land with a basic land type. So that is, you know, you're not going to be able to cheat the system there with special dual lands that have the land types or anything like that. But I think just having a way to get incidentally an extra mana during combat on a key turn is super, super big deal. A super, super big deal on a land that is just strictly going to be better than a mountain most of the time if you're running it in the right deck. So I think this card is the real deal. I think it's absolutely crazy, and I think Mono Red is going to be running it 1000%. 1000%. There's no way Mono Red doesn't. What's the reason to not run this, right? There's no way you're never going to have a basic mountain on the battlefield. It's always going to enter untapped. It's always going to give you the same red mana a mountain would. You just have this strict upside of, in the right scenario, you have an extra mana to use on an instant speed pump spell and possibly just win the game now instead of waiting. That seems like everything Mono Red wants. So this card's going to be real. I don't really love Mono Red, but with the Vivi decks running rampant, I'm kind of rooting for Mono Red to take Vivi down, so I'll take it. I'll take it. Next up, we've got Elemental Teachings, an instant lesson for 1 green and 4. You search your library for up to 4 land cards with different names and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So what's interesting about this card is they have to all have different names. So you can't just find like basic lands. Like, you're probably going to want to have a lot of dual lands and have different options to choose from. So it makes it hard for your opponent to tuck the right lands away for you to not have access to. But even then, they go into your graveyard, right? So in the right deck where you can get things back from your graveyard, this could be just pure value. Like, you ramp 2 lands right away and put 2 in the graveyard to grab later with some kind of synergy. I love that. I love that this is a lesson because it's going to line up with all of your lesson synergies. You could possibly grab it with a learn spell in older formats, stuff like that. That being said, 5 mana is a lot. 5 mana is a lot, and the floor is just ramping 2 for 5 mana. So unless you line up just the right situations where you can get all the value out of this, this could just be a 5 mana ramp 2, which is not good. It's not good at all. That being said, it can grab any lands, right? It doesn't have to grab basics, and that puts it a little bit ahead of other ramp spells that can only find basics. You could find like 4 very specific lands that maybe provide extra value, like man lands and stuff like that. Lands that are creature factories, things of that nature, so that whatever 2 lands you get, they're not just producing mana for you, but they are creating value on the board. That's a nice little caveat that makes this card a little bit better. But still, at the end of the day, 5 mana is 5 mana, and that is a lot to potentially only ramp 2 if your synergies don't line up for getting value out of the 2 that go into your graveyard. And that's a little bit worrisome. So I'm not sure if this is going to make the cut, but if there ends up being some crazy land deck where there are powerful lands that have powerful non-mana abilities, and this lets you dig and find them, a card like this could end up seeing play constructed, but it's really going to depend on just what that power level is like for, you know, your non-basic lands with these extra non-mana abilities. Next up, we've got my Scornful Striker, a 2/2 legendary human noble ally for 2 mana, 1 black and 1. She's got first strike, and whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, they lose 2 life. Wow. This, I've never seen, this is anti-prowess tech like all day. Just play a 2/2 first striker. They can't swing in with their little crappy dudes, or you just block and kill them. So it kind of sets up a decent defense or a decent attacker, to be completely honest. It picks up human tribal benefits, it picks up ally tribal benefits, and it just absolutely punishes prowess decks. I love everything about that. Or honestly, not even just prowess decks. You could jam this against like a Simulacrum Synthesizer artifact deck, and most of the cards that they play are non-creature artifacts. They'll lose 2 life for every single one that they play. That seems really good too. This card, the more I think about it, I think this card is going to be like an MVP in the meta because of how many different decks that it can absolutely punish to an insane degree. Think about if you want to go off and win the game with Vivi and cast like 3 buff spells in one turn, they lose 6 life if that happens. If they really go off and generate a ton of mana and do even more spells, they could lose like 8 or 10 life in one turn off this. Just absolutely bonkers, in my opinion. Sure, it really depends on the meta and what decks are popular and how relevant it is and how many non-creature spell decks you're going to be seeing. But at this point in time, I think it's super relevant. We could see a point in the future where the format really focuses more on creatures and this card becomes a little less useful. Even then, I think it might be an interesting sideboard option. At the very least, I think this is a really good sideboard option against non-creature spell decks, especially decks like Vivi or just Mono Red Prowess or anything like that. So this card excites me. I want to use this so bad. I want to punish Prowess decks so bad with this. Let's do it. But next up, we've got Avatar Destiny, an enchantment aura for 2 green and 2. Enchants a creature you control. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard and is an avatar in addition to its other types. When enchanted creature dies, you mill cards equal to its power. Return this card to its owner's hand and up to 1 creature card milled this way to the battlefield under your control. Wow, that's a lot. So your dude gets a huge buff for all the creatures in your graveyard. And then when it dies, you mill a bunch of cards, put this back in your hand so that you can reapply the buff later, and put a creature card that you milled just onto the battlefield. Just straight up onto the battlefield. So it's kind of like a delayed Zombify, but also a huge, potentially huge buff in the meantime that they have to deal with this game-ending threat by killing your thing to trigger the thing, and you just get it back anyway, plus you get a free creature. Are we going to see like a Golgari Reanimator deck? Is that what this wants to do? It seems pretty good. You have to line things up in very interesting ways to get the most value out of it. As it stands, it could just be a big buff on a creature that's already out, and maybe that ends up not mattering a whole lot to your opponent. Maybe they can just chump block it for days. Hard to say. I feel like there's definitely going to be a deck that makes this card super relevant. Some kind of new Golgari mill or Sultai mill or something like that, using like Superior Spider-Man. I don't know. This is one I'm going to have to think about. I really think there's some deck that's going to love this card, and that deck might not exist yet. But it also might just be sort of an extension of the Arden Superior Spider-Man sort of deck that you see every now and then. I really like this. I want to brew around it, but I cannot wrap my head around how to get the most value out of it right now, off the cuff in the moment. If you guys have ideas about how to take advantage of this card to its fullest, what kind of deck you'd want to build around it, let me know in the comments. I think this card is really interesting and really awesome. But next up, we've got Jasmine Dragon Tea Shop, a land that taps for a colorless mana, or it can tap for a mana of any color, but you can only use that mana to cast an ally spell or activate an ability of an ally source. And then it also has the ability to pay 5 and tap it to create a 1/1 white ally creature token. This land is absolutely bonkers, and if you had any doubt whatsoever that ally tribal as a deck archetype in Standard was a thing, all of that doubt should be absolutely thrown out the window. This, along with the caverns, and I think we even still have Secluded Courtyard and Foundations. We have like 3 different tribal lands that can be used for allies. You can very, very easily do 5-color allies and just go super, super deep into all of the best ally cards regardless of color, and then have this incidental extra value of just pumping out tokens. And you got to remember, if you're in the ally deck, you have all of these ways to synergize with allies, pump allies, that sort of thing. So spitting out a 1/1 token every turn if you're out of gas and need something to dump your mana into, it's actually way better than a 1/1 token, right? It's gonna get buffs. It's gonna be better than just that 1/1 that you think you're getting. Everything about this card is absolutely what allies needed to cement it as a potential archetype in Standard. I think it's going to be the real thing. I'm excited to brew with this. Absolutely. Absolutely, allies will be a thing in Standard. But next up, we've got 𝐵𝑒𝑐𝑒𝑐𝑠 Bounty Hunters, and I believe that's the last card today. This is a 4/4 human mercenary for 4 mana in the colors of Golgari, and whenever a non-land creature you control dies, you earthbend X, where X is that creature's power. This seems kind of insane. It's pretty on rate already as a 4/4 for 4, and it doesn't say another non-land creature, so if it dies, it replaces itself with a 4/4. One of your lands becomes a 4/4. And again, remember, earthbending means even if they kill that earthbent land, it comes back as the normal land, so you're not risking losing your lands forever. So everything about this is awesome. A 4/4 that replaces itself with another 4/4 when it dies is the floor, and that's awesome. But if they don't prioritize getting rid of this, every single creature of yours that dies replaces itself with a huge land creature when it dies. That just seems nuts to me. You could maybe even build this into some weird new type of sacrifice deck where you're intentionally sacrificing your own creatures to make huge land creatures, and finding ways to get extra value off that, maybe reanimating the stuff that you sacrifice. It's probably just used as more of a checks and balances to protect your board state rather than anything else, but it could also be super relevant in like a +1/+1 counters matters style deck. There's a lot of different ways I think you can use this. This card's an exciting one to build around. I think even just in like, you know, a Golgari mid-range deck like the Rock or something like that, I think it adds a lot of value where it just shores up all of your defenses. You jam this right before you're about to attack, and now you can attack carefree. Even if your opponent blocks your big honkin' dudes and trades with them, you get a guy back and they don't. It just allows you to leverage so much pressure and just be so aggressive and make life miserable for your opponent. And I love that. I love that you can put that much pressure on your opponent, shore up your defenses, protect your board with a card that at the same time is a 4/4 they need to deal with that gives you another 4/4 when they do deal with it. All of that together makes this card really, really good, I think. There has to be some kind of new version of the Rock that makes use of a card like this. There has to be. We're going to try and experiment and figure that deck out because I think it's going to be super fun. But that's going to do it for this video. We've already started to see even more spoilers drop, so I will have another video on the way ASAP with even more Avatar spoilers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. And if you have subscribed, please hit the like button because it helps out a ton. Honestly, all of that stuff matters so much. It helps with the algorithm. The more likes there are, the more people the algorithm will show this video to, and that will bring in more traffic and more subscribers, and the channel will grow. And then it's easier for me to keep doing this and making these videos for you guys. So please hit the button, do the thing, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks so much for checking out my channel. I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons over at Patreon. Without you guys, this channel would not be possible, so honestly, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of your contributions. If you haven't yet, like and subscribe. The more likes we get and the quicker we get them, the bigger this channel will grow and the faster it will grow. I'd love nothing more than this channel to become something very special for you guys, but it's entirely up to you how fast that happens. Also, if you'd like more deck text, that's somewhere over there. And if you'd like to see what else the channel's been up to lately, that's somewhere up that way. Also, subscribe, circle below, do all the things.